everyone.
Hi.
Hopefully you guys can all see us. I apologize for starting 15 minutes late. We were going live onto the wrong page. So if you can see us, please feel free to like or throw a comment in. And as we go through today's presentation, I think if you were following along with us on the other page that we had posted on, we're just gonna start it right back up because we wanna make sure that you guys are all able to see this. But if you were tuning in at 7 o'clock to see us, I apologize for the delay, but we're here and we'll go through the full 30 minutes now. And we do record it and it saves to our page so that you can review any of this if you can't stay for the entire thing. But my name is Kayleen Heaton, and I'm a professional development specialist from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. If you were on the Facebook Live event last week, hopefully my face looks familiar at this point.
Hi, my name is Anna Moya. I'm also a professional development specialist with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and this is my first Facebook Live event, so I'm happy to join you.
It's a good day. So if you haven't been with us yet for a Facebook Live event, we're going to be hosting them from September through October. We're also going to have a few options available in Spanish. We'll be
September through November.
September through November, my goodness. And we'll also be sure to go through the detailed schedule, and Anna will make sure that I'm correct. At the very end of the video, we'll let you know what the next Facebook Live event's going to be. But for today's session, it's going to be a very candid 30-minute discussion, and we're going to be talking about financial aid, focusing in on what financial aid is, and then the different types of aid that are available to students. So again, as we're going through this, any questions, any comments, anything that you might have, feel free to throw it up in the comment section, and we'll be sure to try and address those as we go through this.
Yes. So we're going to start with what is financial aid. Financial aid, we define it as borrowed, given, or earned money. Anything that falls under this umbrella to pay for college or for the purposes of college is going to be financial aid.
Yes. And so with financial aid, it's intended to make up the difference between how much a family can afford to pay for college and then the cost of that college. So when you're talking about financial aid, it is intended to fill the difference between the actual cost of the institution, how much the family can afford. Financial aid is intended to fill this bucket.
With financial aid, there's also, under the umbrella that I'm talking about, it's gift aid and self-help aid. With gift aid, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's money that the student does not have to pay back if they're being offered this gift aid. They just have to meet the minimum requirements for it. Under gift aid, we have two subcategories. It's going to be grants and scholarships.
So Anna, did you, in your college career, did you get any types of gift aid?
I did. I was very fortunate to receive the Pell Grant, which I'm sure we're going to cover and explain a little bit more about that. But the Pell Grant is a grant that comes from the Department of Education. And then I was also able to receive the MAP grant, the Monetary Award Program, which ISAC administers.
Very nice. And then I was able to, when I was in school, not that you asked, but I'll let you know anyway. When I was in school, I got a merit-based scholarship. One of them was just when I had applied to the school. They ran my application through the different scholarships that they had available at the institution, and because I had a certain GPA and test score, I was able to get that merit-based scholarship basically without having to do much of anything other than apply to the school. So that was really cool. But there are definitely different types of merit-based aid out there and different types of scholarships that you can apply for. So making sure that you're looking to check if there's any additional ones you can apply for. That's something I was kind of kicking myself for, because I did not look and see if there was additional ones I could apply for. And lo and behold, there were a ton of additional ones that just required a separate application that I didn't think to apply to. So be sure that when you are looking for gift aid, you got to fill out the FAFSA to see, what types of need-based financial aid you may qualify for from the federal government. But then also making sure too that you are looking into the merit-based scholarships, and that you are looking far and wide, because there are tons of different types of merit-based scholarship options.
And then this is one of the questions that I would say I get asked the most when we say fill out the FAFSA as soon as possible. I have parents who ask me, do my students get additional funds if they are if they have good grades? The difference between grants and scholarship, for purposes of the FAFSA, their good grades are just basically they don't matter as long as they make satisfactory progress for them. But grants are usually based on the student's financial need. With scholarships, those are the ones where if you ask me, does my student get anything for having good grades, it's going to be based on scholarships, because that's merit-based as well.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about grants too. Those can really help students. A lot of times students might think, oh, I don't I might not qualify for those, you know, based off of my GPA and test score, but grants are need-based. So if you have need, you will qualify for those. It's not, you know, based off of academics or things like that. Another type of financial aid, and as Anna had mentioned, financial aid really is like an umbrella term, and there's a lot of different subcategories and different types of aid that fall into that. But we just covered gift aid, so that's like the kind of free money to go to school. That's the type of aid, once you're awarded that, you do not have to pay that back.
That's when we get excited.
Yes, I mean, you should get excited about gift aid too, because that's, you know, that's awesome. It's kind of no strings attached. Once you've been awarded that, that is yours. Self-help aid, on the other hand, this is a different type of financial aid, and that's when we're talking about financial aid that is either borrowed or earned. So if we're talking about borrowed financial aid, that's going to be your loans. And then if you're talking about earned financial aid, that would be like federal work study. And it's important to know too, because I think a lot of students get confused when you say financial aid, students immediately think of like the gift aid.
Free money, yes.
Yes, they think of the free money. So they're like, oh man, awesome, I'm getting, you know, my financial need is met in full with financial aid. So they might get super excited, but you have to remember that loans and work study are considered financial aid as well, because we see a lot of students that get really confused with their financial aid award letters that'll come from schools in the spring after you've applied, been accepted, completed your FAFSA, all of that stuff. And it tells you the breakdown of the financial aid that they're gonna give you. Sometimes it might say financial need is met in full, and the students think that that means it's with all of the gift aid, but loans can be in there. So you really have to make sure that you're looking at the different types of financial aid because they operate in different ways. So you want to talk a little about loans? I know you love loans.
I love loans.
Love talking about loans.
Well, yeah, with financial aid, just want to backtrack a little bit with financial aid before we talk about loans. With financial aid, what it's intended to do, like Keely mentioned earlier, maybe it was the other one.
Might have been our previous iteration of this video.
With financial aid, what it's intended to do is to help the student pay for the sticker price of the school. Do you want to go into that?
Oh, of course. The sticker price, that's a term that we like to use at ISAC, is the cost of attendance of a university. So the cost of attendance is that, you know, if you Google, you know, the U of I and what their, you know, freshman tuition is, or what their, you know, freshman cost of attendance is, that is what we refer to as the sticker price, because the cost of attendance includes a bunch of different components. So it has things like tuition and fees, room and board, transportation, books and supplies, and miscellaneous living expenses. So it has a bunch of different components in it, because that is what the school has said, okay, this is what it costs a typical, you know, student on our campus to attend this institution. This is everything that, you know, goes into being a student at the institution. But the thing with cost of attendance is it's broken down between direct expenses and indirect expenses. Direct expenses, there's not flexibility with. So that's things like tuition and fees. The school sets the price, and if you want to be a student at that school, you have to, you know, pay that amount. It gets paid directly to the institution. It is a set price. So with direct expenses, those are all set. However, cost of attendance includes indirect expenses as well. So this is things that the school includes in the cost of attendance because they know it's a component of being a student, but the amount that they include is based off of estimates of what they assume that the average student spends on this. So before we even, you know, get into different types of financial aid, it's important to know that that cost of attendance, or the sticker price of the school, before financial aid is even applied, you could bring that down if you're just kind of a frugal student. And if you know of ways to save in the indirect expenses, you could bring down that sticker price before you even start applying any type of financial aid. So what are some ways that, getting back into your, you know, college days, what are some ways that you brought down your cost of attendance?
For me, because room and board can be an direct expense, because some schools require students to room with them their freshman year at least. But it's also an indirect expense, because if you have a student who's living at home, they're obviously going to be cutting back on those that room and board expenses. So that was my way to cut back on costs when I was in college, living at home. And the same thing that you did as well, renting out books. My first year I didn't. I wasn't very good about it because I didn't know too much about it. But my second year, I definitely got smart.
Yeah, it's tempting. And if you're curious as to what Kayleen's biggest piece of advice is to all incoming freshmen, it's do not get lured in by the school's bookstore. Every freshman that goes on campus, like, the bookstore is always awesome. They have a bunch of the college swag, various, you know, apparel and different things that you can buy. And they also have all of the brand new textbooks that you can buy for every single course that's offered at the school. That is where you are going to pay the absolute highest premium for your book. So be smart about it. Rent used textbooks, especially. There's really no need to buy, textbooks, especially when you're taking general education classes and those aren't books that you are often going to refer to the rest of your life. So just kind of think about that. And that's a huge way to bring down that cost of attendance before even applying any types of financial aid.
Yeah, so that's what we wanted to cover, that before covering financial aid. What it's intended to do is to cover those costs. So if you see your award letter, you see tuition and fees, you got to say, yes, I'll cover those because you have to. But everything else, you could be a little bit flexible when you're talking about financial aid, just in case you don't get offered enough financial aid.
Yeah. So now getting further into financial aid. So we talked about what is as a whole. So it's intended, again, to make up the difference between how much a family can afford to pay for college and how much the school actually costs. We talked about the different kind of categories. So you have gift aid, which is grants and scholarships. And then you have self-help aid, which is loans and work study. Now we're going to talk about the different sources of financial aid. So where does financial aid come from? There's 4 main sources of financial aid. So you have the federal government, which is
the Department of Ed.
Then you have the state government, and in Illinois, that is
the Illinois Student Assistance Commission.
That's us. Woo-hoo. We administer the state financial aid within the state of Illinois, not us personally, but the agency. Then you have the colleges and the universities. So each college and each university has their own pool of institutional aid that they can award to students as they see fit. And then lastly, you have kind of the catch-all category, which is outside and private sources. So this could be any company, organization, nonprofit, church, mission, any type of group that is awarding out scholarships. Basically, this is
loans.
Or loans, yes. And this is coming from anywhere that is not the other sources. So if it's not the institution, the Department of Ed, or ISAC, it would be considered an outside private source. And with that, I think too, something important to know. I feel like I've said that a lot already. All of this is important to know. Just
all of it.
Say it's all good stuff. But with the different sources of financial aid, the best way to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of financial aid is by making sure that you are dipping into all 4 of the sources.
Yes.
In order to do that, and we'll be getting into this more, but in order to dip into the federal source of student aid, you have to complete the FAFSA. States have their own specific, a lot of states have their own specific forms and rules and regulations for applying to their own state aid. Then you also have the institutions you have to apply and then look if they have any institutional scholarships you can apply for. And then don't neglect that last box, because that is what I did. I totally forgot about outside and private sources of financial aid. So once I completed my FAFSA, I applied to the school. I didn't look outside of institutional scholarships. I stopped there. But there are so many outside private sources that you could look for. And one resource that we love to use at ISAC is College Greenlight. And I will actually, in the comment section, I won't type it now because my hands will be all up in the camera, but I will leave it in the comment section after. It's www.collegegreenlight.com/ISAC. It is a private scholarship search engine, so students can go on there. They can create a profile where they self-disclose information about themselves, so like GPA, test scores, as much as they feel comfortable, race, religion, ethnicity, all of that stuff in there. And once they do that, it matches to a database of private scholarships. It matches them to scholarships that they are eligible to apply for based off of the information that they put in their profile. So this can be really helpful because sometimes it's daunting if you go to Google and you're saying, oh, let me look up private scholarships I can apply to. You're going to get this crazy huge list of a bunch of different ones. You don't know whether or not they're legitimate or vetted, and you also don't know if you're even eligible to apply for it until you read through the requirements of the scholarship. College Greenlight really helps to bring it all in one place. So that'll be something that I definitely include. Don't forget, definitely include on the comments at the end of this, because that can be a great way to apply for those private sources.
And it's a free resource for everyone. What else is a free resource for everyone that people should not pay to apply to or complete?
The FAFSA. Yes. And so the FAFSA is the way, in order to tap, currently in the state of Illinois, in order to tap into our state and our federal financial aid, you need to complete the FAFSA. There's upcoming changes coming with the RISE Act application, which will be available. It becomes effective in January 1st of 2020. So that'll be, I'm not going to get too much into that now because we will cover that in later Facebook events. But the thing to remember here is that the FAFSA is going to be the way to tap into state and federal financial aid currently. and you want to be completing the FAFSA because that's the only way to tap into that. If you don't complete a FAFSA, there's not, an alternative way of applying for federal student aid.
And the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So it's on the name, free application. So you should never pay to get that filled out. Now, we want students to fill out the FAFSA because we talked about the 4 sources of financial aid. The FAFSA is the one where you could dip into the biggest one, which is the Department of Education. And we're going to go through some of the programs that they have with financial aid. The first one, and my favorite one to talk about, is Federal Work Study. So Federal Work Study is a program that it's an campus-based program because only certain campuses participate in it. They have an agreement with the Department of Ed. The Department of Ed pays the student a certain amount from their salary, and the school only has to pay the other part of their salary as well. So schools really like it when students are Federal Work Study students because they don't have to dip into their pockets as much as a regular student.
Yes. And with Federal Work Study, essentially it's like a part-time job on campus. The thing is, it is need-based, so you do have to make sure that you're completing the FAFSA. And then if you get awarded Federal Work Study, the amount that you are eligible to receive is going to show up on your financial aid award letter. But it's up to the student to get that part-time Federal Work Study position, to work that, and then those funds will be paid to them in the form of a paycheck based off of how much they earned. So you have to work in order to earn those funds.
And there's a question on the FAFSA that specifically asks the student if they want to be a part of the Federal Work Study program.
Yeah, it's important too with Federal Work Study. I always tell students that I'm working with is if you are awarded Federal Work Study, make sure that you realize that that is funds that's going to come to you in the form of a paycheck. So you can take that and you can, it's a normal paycheck. You can go spend that on Chipotle and, go spend that on a night out or whatever the heck you want to spend it on. But if you are counting on that to go towards paying for your, tuition and fees or anything within your cost of attendance, you then have to make sure you're taking that and going to the financial aid office and applying it to your tuition and fees. Otherwise, if you're just spending that money, you might have a gap at the end of the semester where you're saying, oh shoot, how I'm, $2,000 in the hole and there's a hold on my account and I can't, sign up for spring semester. And I've seen a lot of students that happens and they wonder, how did this happen? Yes. Did you have Federal Work Study? Yeah. How much were you supposed to get this semester? $2,000. Did you work? I did. What'd you do with it? I spent it. Well, that's why you ended up with that hole. So make sure if you did get Federal Work Study that you know before going into the semester if you need to use that to go directly to pay for school, or if you're going to use that as spending money for those, miscellaneous and other expenses as you please. Make sure that you're aware of how you're going to fill that gap on your financial aid award letter, because that's something I can see that tends to be tricky for students, or they might not realize in their first year.
Yeah. And then with that being said too, if you do end up getting Federal Work Study and your tuition and fees are paid for and there's not going to be a hold on your account, you have to remember cost of attendance also includes miscellaneous expenses. So it is okay to spend it on Chipotle.
Yes, because it's food. Yeah. So with Federal Work Study, that's that miscellaneous living expenses. That's a catch-all. You can spend that on toiletries. You can spend that on necessities that you need in order to be able to maintain your student status at the institution.
Yeah.
Did you have a work study job?
I did not. I had a part-time job outside of work.
I did the same thing. So Anna and I were both fools,
yes.
And we did not utilize the Federal Work Study program, even though I think we both would have been eligible based off of our EFCs and our need at the time. But
I do hear from my friends that it was an awesome experience too, just because they got to do things that some of them participated in jobs. We always talk about working at the library, but it wasn't jobs jobs pertaining to their career, to their major that they were looking for. So they say it was an awesome experience because they got some hands-on experience on it.
Well, and the thing is too, if you're working in a Federal Work Study position, they realize that you're a student.
Yeah.
Like you are a student on their campus. They understand that you're a student first. So they tend to be more flexible with, like, if it's finals week and you maybe need to take off to study, they tend to be a lot more flexible to accommodate the fact that you are in fact a student. They also aren't going to schedule you on things like holiday breaks or, spring break or anything like that for the most part.
Yeah.
Because the school is out at that time too. So it's not like you're going to get stuck having to work during those breaks. And additionally, with Federal Work Study, there's, Sarah had mentioned this last week. She worked, it was IT. But she was saying that she's like, there's perks a lot of times to Federal Work Study programs. So she got free printing at school because she was like the little IT person that did stuff. She would be good at that. But she was the IT person that did stuff with the computers, so she was able to get free printing. So with federal work study, these tend to be very like hot jobs on campus that a lot of people want because they do understand the fact that you're a student, you're working with fellow students. Generally, people that have taken work study positions, they really like that. I know I did not have a federal work study position. I worked at an ice cream shop when I was in college, and they didn't care when it was winter break or when I had finals, because they schedule you like a normal part-time job. Like they just expect the fact that, okay, it's a part-time job. When I schedule you, you're going to be able to be available. So it would be very difficult, especially when my schedule would shift for semesters. If I was taking classes certain days in the fall and then that switched for the spring, it was always like really tough to try and have to adjust that with my, part-time job, because the fact that you're a student doesn't matter as much to them.
Try working retail during holidays.
Oh, retail during holidays.
But
yikes.
Even though we didn't take advantage of the federal work study program, we did take advantage. Well, didn't take advantage. We participated in this program and received it. It was the Pell Grant. It also comes from the Department of Education, and it comes by filling out the FAFSA. It is a need-based program. I believe it's one of the biggest grants in the nation.
I believe so.
Yeah. For the 2019-2020 school year, if a student is fully eligible for the Pell Grant, they can receive up to $6,195 for that one.
Mm-hmm.
This is money that the student does not have to pay back, and they could see if they're eligible for it just by filling out the FAFSA.
And you just reminded me of an excellent point. So with the Pell Grant, because this is a federal grant, this is federal student aid, you are able to use it at pretty much any accredited institution in the nation.
Yes.
So this can move with you if you go out of state, if you go, it doesn't matter, as long as it's an accredited institution for the most part within the US, Pell Grant's able to go with you. State aid, on the other hand, this can be different. So specifically within the state of Illinois, our MAP grant, that is our big need-based grant. It's the Monetary Award Program grant, and that one's for $5,340.
For the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you. And with that grant, in order to receive that grant, you can only get it at Illinois MAP-approved colleges. So it is really important with state aid that you understand the ramifications about the different schools you're looking at. So if you're looking at, I might qualify if I filled out the FAFSA and I had a 0 EFC, meaning I had full need, I qualified for all of the, federal and state aid that's available, the need-based federal and state aid. I would not be able to, if I wanted to go to like University of Wisconsin, my MAP grant would not be able to come with me. I would only be eligible for the Pell Grant. The MAP grant would only come with me if I went to Illinois MAP-approved institutions. So it's really important to understand that, because that can be, the MAP grant's $5,340. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. So that can really kind of swing the pendulum as to where you kind of decide to go to school. Yeah.
Also with the Department of Ed, we have student loans, and Kayleen likes to joke that that's my favorite thing.
It's your favorite topic. She loves them.
It is not my favorite topic, but I do love them because they did help me get through college. Even though they're scary, they looked scary to me when I was a student, but they did help me a lot.
And that's an excellent point. I mean, I always joke with Anna, but I would not have been able to afford my college education if it wasn't for student loans. I did not have, the money up front to be able to cover that out of pocket. So with student loans, I think the biggest thing that students need to know is it can be an extremely useful tool to pay for college, as long as you are a smart and responsible borrower and you're not borrowing past your means, and you kind of understand the ramifications of loans and what you're getting yourself into before you sign on to the dotted line.
Yeah, and then with the loans from the Department of Ed, we're only going to talk on loans from the Department of Education because private loans can be a little bit tricky. And then there are a lot of perks that come along with the loans from the Department of Ed. One of them being that the student does not need a great credit score. We're working with students. Typically, they're going to be coming out of high school, so they're going to be 17, 18, which means they don't have a ton of time to build that credit line.
My credit did not exist at that age.
No.
Nope, didn't have a credit card.
So that's one of the nice things for those students. And they're also, with borrowing responsibly, they do cap off those loans, so it's not like the student can go crazy borrowing money from them. They also have a lower interest rate than what a private loan would be, and then they also don't require a co-signer for the student. So that's one of the really nice perks with the the loans from the Department of Ed.
And in order to be eligible to receive loans from the Department of Education, remember it's considered it's considered financial aid. This is federal financial aid. You have to complete the FAFSA. That is the only way to see if you're eligible for federal student aid is by completing the FAFSA. So you need to, if you are interested in taking out loans from the Department of Education, you definitely want to complete your FAFSA because that's the only way you would be eligible to do so.
What two types of loans are there available for undergraduate students?
That is an excellent question, Anna. So the two types of loans that are available at the undergraduate level are the direct subsidized loans from the Department of Education and the direct unsubsidized loans. So the direct subsidized loans, these, let me backtrack. I'll start with the direct unsubsidized loans. The direct unsubsidized loans, these are pretty much your standard loans. So you borrow the initial lump sum, and then as soon as those funds are dispersed, the student is responsible for paying any interest that's going to accrue on those loans, and they're going to have to pay that loan back in full plus any interest that has accrued, you know, while the loan is is live while the loan is live, much like us. Subsidized loans, on the other hand, from the Department of Education, these are need-based, so not all students are going to qualify for these loans. You have to have some demonstrated financial need in order to qualify for this. But with subsidized loans, the Department of Education will pay the interest that is accruing while the student is in school, at least part-time. So those loans are generally seen as the most desirable because if you do qualify for these loans, it means that, so say I borrowed $3,000 for my freshman year. It means that by the time that I finish my degree program, being enrolled full-time, we'll say yes, full-time, finish my 4-year degree program, I have my 6-month grace period where I don't have to make any payments back. By the time I do have to start paying that loan back, it's only going to be $3,000 that I'm paying back because any interest that was accruing while I was in school, the Department of Education was paying off. With unsubsidized loans, on the other hand, if I borrow $3,000 in my freshman year, by the time that I, get through my degree and I hit my 6-month grace period, by the time that ends and I have to start making payments back, if I wasn't paying any interest while I was in school, I'm likely going to have to pay like $3,500 back because there was interest that was accruing while I was, as soon as that loan was dispersed. So it's important to understand the difference between the two. And a thing that I've seen a lot of students do too, if they do take out unsubsidized loans, is they'll pay off the interest while they're in school because those payments tend to be pretty small or at least more manageable for students than, having to make like full-on loan payments. So if you're able to pay off the interest on an unsubsidized loan while you are in school, that'll really help you because that means that the interest won't capitalize at the end and that won't become, the new amount that you have to pay back. So, yeah.
And that's just a reminder that student loans are considered financial aid as well. Yes. Including Parent Plus loans too, that the Department of Ed offers. And I think this is where in award letters we start to see that if there's a huge gap in financial need, schools tend to fill it in with Parent Plus loans. I've seen some that are as high as $20,000. So with that, it is a lower interest rate than some private loans as well. There are some perks to it. But with the Parent Plus loan, with the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, it is the student's responsibility to pay that money back.
Student is the borrower. That is debt that the student is taking on.
With the Parent Plus loan, is the responsibility of the parent. And then with parents, if you guys see an award letter that has an amount that's that high, $20,000 a year, you have to keep in mind that it's a year. Financial aid comes year to year, and you have to fill out the FAFSA every year. You have to continuously keep filling out scholarships. With Parent Plus loans, they're unsubsidized. There are no subsidized loans with them. And the repayment starts 60 days after the money has been disbursed to the student. And again, it's the parent's responsibility. If you multiply whatever you're going to borrow the first year times 4, it's going to be a large amount if you want to retire.
And that is an excellent point too. And I don't know if we mentioned this before, but when you're taking out loans, consider that if you're taking out, so say for freshman year, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to take out, $6,000 worth of loans. Times that by whatever the length of your degree is going to be, because that'll likely be the amount that you end up having to graduate with then in debt. And did I mention my rule of thumb on this one?
No.
I didn't. Oh, so I have a rule of thumb.
Sorry, we're going back and forth just because of the other one.
Because of our missed post. I apologize for that. But so a really helpful rule of thumb that I like to use with thinking about loans and how much is a reasonable amount to take out is if you think about the starting salary of the career that you hope to get as soon as you graduate with your degree or credential, the amount in loans that you take out should not exceed whatever that starting salary is. So if I wanted to be a teacher and the starting salary in the district that I'm interested in is $40,000, that means to earn my teaching degree, I should not be borrowing more than $40,000 worth of loans. So again, that is not like an end-all be-all rule, and it's definitely, it kind of depends on your situation, but it's a fairly good way to gauge whether or not you're in an area where you might starting to be borrowing more than the value of your degree, or more where it's going to be difficult for you to actually start making payments back.
I think the last thing we're going to talk about, because we're going to have other Facebook Live events
Yes.
on state programs, and we're also going to have another Facebook Live event for scholarships. The last thing would be institutional money, which we touch a little bit with merit-based, but institutional money, it's I was going to say it's going to be tricky, but it's not tricky. Every school has their own rules and regulations, and how much money they give to the students. So that depends on the students' grades and what the criteria of the school is.
This is why it's important to apply to multiple institutions. Don't just apply to one school, because all schools have their own different pools of institutional aid. Some schools might have more institutional aid than others. Some schools might be more liberal in giving out their institutional aid than others, and who qualifies and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really important, apply to multiple schools, because this offers you the opportunity to look and say, wow, this school is, really meeting a lot of my financial need with, gift aid. Whereas another school, you might be looking at it and thinking, ooh, this school's not giving me much institutional gift aid. This might not be, a feasible option for me financially. So I think that is the full, we've hit our full 30 minutes. Again, we so apologize for starting late. We're new to the Facebook. So Anna and I were a little slow in operating it today. But we just want to give you a rundown of the upcoming Facebook Live events. I promise you they will start promptly at 7 o'clock. This is Trial by Fire. We figured out how to do it now. That's what happens when Sarah from IT is not here. But so the next Facebook Live event we have is going to be on September 25th. I believe that is another Wednesday.
Yes.
It's another Wednesday. We're going to be talking about admissions, kind of in the whole process behind that, and college applications, all of that good stuff. And it's going to be from 7 o'clock to 7:30. We will be starting promptly at 7 o'clock.
They're all going to be from 7 o'clock to 7:30.
Unless we screw up where we post the initial video and have to start recording at 7:15. We also, as Sarah had mentioned this last week in our Facebook Live video, but we do have some Facebook Live events that are going to be available in Spanish. The Spanish Facebook Live events that we have the first one is on October 2nd. Then we have another one that is going to be on October 9th. And then we have a third one that is going to be on October 24th, and a fourth one on November 14th.
And they're all going to be in Spanish.
Those ones will be in Spanish. I'm only conversational, so I will not be on those. I'm working on it, though. Maybe next year.
We'll have her join for fun.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave them, and I will post the College Greenlight link as well. Thank you.
Bye.